question as to the origin of those hairs?
No, we have not. We don't have a hair sample to compare those hairs to yet. Oh, I'm sorry, you just want did you want a body origin?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have that with me. I don't know if I gave that to. It's in process, and I don't know if that's one of the completed reports that I brought with me last night, which I know the prosecution hasn't had time to review. And
Have you determined those to be Caucasian hairs?
I can't tell you that without referring to the reports.
Can you look at the report?
I don't have it with me because no one has reviewed it yet, and I know you don't have it.
Your Honor, I was just provided this this morning. This is a package for counsel pursuant to the request we made when we were last in court. And I'm going to turn it over to counsel and give you an opportunity to look at it. I haven't seen it myself. We all just got these packages. So I'd ask counsel to acknowledge receipt of it on the record. And
that package is from the crime lab?
Yes, it is.
it's from the crime lab. If the court recalls, last time we were in court, we promised to turn over the records requested verbally, and I just got them. I'd ask that counsel sign for them where it's indicated and date it, and he can take possession, and then I hope that he gets mine at some point later today.
And just so if I may interject, what is not there is the protocols. We're still copying those. Those are volumes that we hope to have them early next week, Monday or Tuesday.
If you could inform the court what you mean by protocol.
The protocols for DNA and the proficiency testing for DNA, the PCR, and also conventional serology.
Does that have anything to do with the results or testing conducted in this case?
Not, it does, but it's not, we haven't talked about it here today.
No, the point being, that's a protocol you follow in all cases, is that right?
That's correct.
Not just for this case?
That's correct.
Your
Mr.
Honor,
Shapiro?
I wonder, based on what the court indicated the schedule would be, if we might take a break so we can review these records before we continue questioning. I anticipate very, very limited questions, only on the remaining four hair samples, and the amount, and for preparation so that the records can be looked at over the break. We'd like to know the number of hairs, whether they are follicles or shafts of hair, where they were found, and how many of them there are.
Your Honor, perhaps the reports that counsel has been given indicate all of that. And if that's the case, then...
Right, and if that information is contained within what you have, then you're going to have the answer to that.
Yeah, if we do. If we don't, those are things we'll be questioning.
Well, if you haven't got the report there, then I can't officially because it hasn't been verified. That means those items aren't done yet, not completed. We're still working on them.
All right, well, you'll have to determine that, and maybe you can sort of confer, if you need to, off the record with regard to some of these items. I don't think it necessarily has to be part of this motion that we're dealing with.
Thank you very much.
All right, then we will break at this time, and yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor, just one more. We received this from DTE. It looks like it's a response to a case taken, and it has been delivered to me by the clerk in the field condition, which is a matter in which it was delivered to her. I take it. Yes. And I'm going to ask to open it now on the record in open court so that counsel can observe the opening and the contents of the envelope, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can this possibly be done in the appropriate manner?
This is the appropriate matter, Your Honor.
Well, I don't know that it has to be on the record.
Seems like a little bit of grandstanding, but
If the two of
maybe it
you-
is, maybe it
Excuse
isn't.
me, I can't believe I heard Mr. Shapiro say that. I'd rather conduct everything on the record, Your Honor, in open court.
All right, then open the envelope. Go ahead.
For the record, reflect that I have now broken the seal, opening the envelope, and I've retrieved what appears to be a one-page letter I'm going to show to counsel.
All right, Ms. Clark, my clerk Alicia informs me that that came accompanied by another larger packet of records which she's holding there, which you'll want to review, and I would really prefer that you, if possible, can review those records off the record.
Well, I'd be delighted to review them off the record. All I want indicated now is that they're in sealed condition and that we may open them and duplicate them for counsel.
assuming that both sides are agreeable to that.
That's agreeable, and that's the proper procedure.
Fine, thank you.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I don't think I've engaged in any improper procedures thus far, and I still appreciate counsel's editorial action.
All right, now, today only, because of certain matters that do not concern the rest of you, we are going to be breaking until 2 o'clock. I anticipate the following schedule, and I assume that most of you have been advised of this, and that is that the court intends to start at 9 o'clock and go until 12 with a 15-minute break somewhere during the mid part of that morning session. The court intends to, under normal circumstances, continue with the proceeding at 1:30 with a 15-minute break somewhere around 3 o'clock or so, and concluding the proceeding at 4:30. That's what I anticipate, and that's a schedule hopefully that we'll be able to abide by, generally speaking. I'm going to ask everyone's cooperation with regard to these breaks that we take, the 15-minute breaks. I would very much like to see them remain 15 minutes as opposed to 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And so it's really going to be up to you folks to make sure that you are back in your seats and all the necessary counsel and so forth are back so that we can keep this matter moving along. So I would request the cooperation of everyone so that we can handle this matter as smoothly as possible. So at this point in time, we will be in recess until 2 o'clock. We will conclude this motion hopefully shortly thereafter, and we will begin with the other motions, including the motion to suppress at that time.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Safely.
And I guess we can continue with the witness, Ms. Kestler.
May I turn over some discovery while we're waiting for her to come in?
Yes.
Pages 539 to 614, I'm handing to the defense counsel now. Copy of the SDPs, which is the original with by return to the court clerk. Yeah, they're ready to come. And I'd like to indicate to the court that I've given a copy to the court for review, an article on proceedings of the International Symposium on Forensic Hair Comparison. I gave a copy of this to counsel this morning. I'm specifically directing the court's attention to page number 11 on it, be the second paragraph in, where it's indicated that it is recommended that a known
Your Honor,
hair sample.
I'm going to object to reading this. This is a document that's a hearsay document stated June 25th, 1985. Thank God, we should have some material a little more recent than 9 years ago. There's testimony that should come from the witness stand from the prosecutor.
All right, is Ms. Kestler prepared to testify in some fashion concerning this particular document?
Yes, sir. And
I'll wait until she refers to it specifically.
As I understand the law, Your Honor, an expert is entitled to rely on articles and periodicals, and that kind of hearsay is admissible through the expert testimony. And I was simply trying to assist the court in directing its attention to the specific area that is in question now.
All right, thank you.
apologize, Your Honor. You would hear the witness may have gone upstairs instead of coming straight to the table. Should be very much.
All right, Ms. Kestler, if you could retake your seat on the witness stand. You've previously been sworn and do remain under oath.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Mr. Shapiro.
Mrs. Kestler, the information that we have just reviewed that was handed to us just before the new recess consists of a one-page document dated 6/29/94 that lists 4 items as hairs and fibers. Do you know which document I'm referring to?
Not off, no. Could you tell me the item numbers?
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Oh, this is a property report, yes.
You familiar with that document?
Yes, I am.
Are there any other documents that have been prepared to your knowledge that relate to the hairs that were removed from items 9, 27, 37, and 38?
Yes, in that same package, along with that document, there was a report, or 2 reports on hair items in regards to those property items booked.
May I just have a moment to get those, Your Honor?
Yes. Plus, I also was able to review and complete for our hair analyst 2 more reports on 2 more items of hair that we discussed earlier this morning that I said were awaiting my approval. And I have copies here.
So you're indicating you have some additional discovery for both counsel?
Yes, I do.
All right, Mr. Shapiro and Ms. Clark, do you want to approach the witness stand and pick up your copies of that?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Those are yours. And those are yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
May I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Could you summarize for us, please, the number of hairs that you recall were found in item number 9?
I believe you have the copy of the report. I'd have to review that.
You don't have that?
No, I don't have that one.
Let me give you all these copies, and then maybe we can work together.
Sure, that's no problem.
If you could keep your voice up, yes. Just to remind me, is item number 9 the glove?
Yes.
Thank you.
And item number 19 were items removed from number 9.
Thank you.
Just let me make sure of that before I say something wrong. Yes, item number 19 contained hairs and fibers removed from item number 9. So this report here, first report is referring to item number 19, and in that item there were 3 human head hairs, blonde in color, and they ranged in length from 3.5 to 29.5 centimeters and exhibited predominantly Caucasian characteristics. They also exhibited indications of possible chemical treatment, bleaching. And none of them had roots. And then there were also several fibers in animal hairs, which we haven't had time to characterize further at this time.
Would you be able to give us the same summary, please, for item number 27, the cap that was found on the driver's floor of the Bronco?
Surely. Item number 111 contained, the new number, item number 111, is the hairs and fibers removed from item number 27, the cap. And that contains, among the hairs were 6 human head hairs ranging in color from brown to black, ranging in length from 1.1 to 2.2 centimeters, and exhibiting predominantly negroid characteristics. 2 of these hairs have intact roots, and the remaining 4 hairs do not have intact roots. And then it goes on to talk about several fibers in animal hairs, which we have not characterized at this time, and some insect activity, which is...
Regarding the 2 hairs that are intact with roots, would it be possible to have your laboratory keep one and share one with an independent laboratory?
Not at this time, because there's no guarantee that with 1 hair you can do PCR or any kind of, it's not necessarily conclusive. We may need both to do DNA analysis on. 1 is not always enough.
With the 4 hairs that do not have roots,
Yes.
would it be possible to share those for independent analysis?
Well, I believe rather than, we're going to, our approach to that normally would be, let me just put it in that form, would be that we analyze all 4 because we don't know whether they're similar at this point. Came from the same individual or could have come from the same individual. We would like to compare all 4 of those hairs to our exemplars, and then using via a master criminalist or something to that effect, allow your laboratory to have all 4 of those hairs or whatever, and they could be viewed by you, all 4 of them. You can't split the hairs. I think we went through this. Well, I heard this on the news.
Yes, we did go through that, but let me just ask you, hairs aren't consumed in the analysis.
No, they're not in microscopic analysis.
So as far as that goes, that once you did whatever you were going to do to the hairs, the ones that without the roots, they could go to the defense and they could do whatever they wanted to with the hairs, presuming that they weren't destroyed somehow in their
Right.
analysis.
That's correct, Your Honor.
The ones with the roots are destroyed in analysis?
Just the portion that's consumed in the PCR analysis, the rest of it remains.
But the root portion would be
The
destroyed?
root portion is consumed, that's correct.
With regard to item 37, would you be kind enough to tell us the type of hairs that were recovered from that item, please?
37. That must be the other report that you still have,
So let me give
or
you
do
all
I
the-
have it?
Let me give you all.
I have 58. Okay, thank you. Well, I have some notes on that. Apparently, that must be one of the reports. I thought that was in your package that I gave you yesterday. Item number 37? Oh, that's the one that's not completed. Okay, that analysis is not completed at this time. We're still working on that.
So you cannot tell us how many hairs
No, I
that were
cannot.
there or what type of hairs
No.
they were?
No, that's still being worked on.
Do you know when you'll have that result?
Hopefully by Monday.
And regarding item number 38,
Item number 38, so that one's completed. Item number 113 are hairs, fibers, et cetera, and debris removed from item number 38. And the blue knit cap. Item 38 is the blue knit cap.
Thank you.
I'll just get summarized down to the important part here. There were 34 human hairs. 32 are consistent with head hair and 2 are consistent with body hair. Among the 32 head hairs, 25 are dark reddish brown to black in color, ranging in length from 0.7 to 3.5 centimeters and exhibiting predominantly negroid characteristics. Additionally, 4 of these 25 hairs have intact roots, while the remaining 21 do not. And these came from both the interior and exterior surfaces of the knit cap.
of the 4, I'm sorry, complete your answer, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. From the remaining 7 head hairs, 5 are blonde in color, ranging in length from 3.0 to 8.5 Okay, I'm sorry. I know that, but I'm reading. From the remaining 7 head hairs, 5 are blonde in color and range in length from 3.0 to 8.5 centimeters and exhibit predominantly Caucasian characteristics and exhibit indications of chemical treatment, i.e. bleaching. These hairs were all located on the exterior surface of the cap. The remaining 2 head hairs, also located on the exterior surface of item 38, are brown and reddish brown in color, 1.0 and 0.9 centimeters in length, respectively, and exhibit predominantly Caucasian characteristics. None of the above described 7 hairs have intact roots, and then there's several animal hairs and fibers, which we have not characterized at this time.
Was there any blood found on item number 38?
Not on 38 per se at this time. We removed the hairs and fibers and have not done a complete blood search for it, but I believe it was laying near blood at the crime scene, and so it wouldn't surprise me if it's contaminated with blood.
Of the 4 hairs that were inside that appear to be Afro-American hair, that have roots,
They have Negroid characteristics. They're not necessarily Afro-American hair. Okay, that's a characteristic and terminology used in hair only, and I'm afraid they've never changed it, so we have to stick with that.
of those 4 hairs, are any of those available to an independent examiner?
Again, not at this time. We'd like to, but the ones with roots, I'm
Yes.
sorry, the ones with roots, again, until the DNA is done, I prefer not to. We don't know. We don't know the strength. We don't know how old the hairs are, so we don't know how strong the DNA might be in the root. Again, at this time, I wouldn't want to give them up until our testing is done.
Where will that testing take place?
I believe we haven't totally decided where we're going to do it yet, but it probably will be done by an independent lab.
Your Honor, may I retrieve the documents that were given to me?
Certainly.
And I have no further questions, thank you.
All right.
Sure. I think these are all yours. No, I think those are all yours, counsel. Yeah, they're all marked.
Ms. Clark, do you have some additional questions of the witness?
I do, very briefly. Ms. Kestler, with respect to the knit cap, item number 38, you indicate that on the interior of the cap was located 34 human hairs?
Now, the 34 hairs, as she stated here, that were from the interior and exterior of the cab.
That's total?
That's total.
Okay. Okay, 2 of those 34 hairs are consistent with body hair. Is that,
2 are consistent with body hair.
and were those 2 that were consistent with body hair found to be demonstrative of Negroid or Caucasian characteristics?
She didn't characterize them at this point, and she didn't also not, or this is our hair analyst, we have not had time to look at them to see if we can tell that. Very often body hair is so fine and so small, it's impossible to determine origin.
And with respect to body hair, is that capable of being, do those 2 hairs have roots?
Apparently, it's not indicated here, and I don't have her notes. I just realized that she did not indicate roots or no roots.
Can that be determined?
Yes.
Then of the 32 head hairs, 25 were found to have Negroid characteristics,
Yes, that's correct, counsel.
and those came from the interior of the cap?
No, those are both from the interior and exterior.
And then the hairs that were determined to be primarily Caucasian, chemically treated blonde hairs, those were from the exterior?
Exterior.
Is it your plan at this time to subject all of the hairs to both PCR and microscopic analysis?
The only hairs that would be subjected to PCR analysis would be those with the roots. The rest would be microscopic examination.
Okay. And based on, in order to perform a microscopic analysis and comparison of hairs, how many head hairs do you need to retrieve from a suspect for the purpose of comparison?
I have a couple of references here, and the references all indicate 30 to 100 hairs. And one of my references is from a book, Forensic Science and Introduction to Criminalistics, by Peter DeForest, Robert Ganslin, and Henry C. Lee. And
I'm sorry, is that the same Henry Lee that we had testimony?
yes, it is.
concerning?
It's the only Henry Lee I know, and that was the one I'm assuming that was the one I was questioned about. On page 211
Of that book,
of that book, which I have
co-authored
extra,
by Henry Lee?
yes, of which I have extra copies here, if anybody wants to
May I close them?
have
Yes.
one. On page 211, he refers to known samples of hair, and we're talking about microscopic examination only here, not DNA analysis. They're two entirely separate types of analysis needing separate samples. Known samples of hair should be given careful consideration. If questioned head hairs are to be submitted, then the known sample should contain representative samples from different parts of the scalp. Ordinarily, the hairs should not be cut. Vigorous combing or massaging of the scalp will usually yield 30 to 40, and he uses the term telogen hairs. That's basically adult hairs or fully grown hairs. If the questioned sample is thought to contain anagen hairs, which are pre-adult hairs, if you will, then so must the known sample, and these must be plucked. It is advantageous to have both plucked and combed hairs in the known sample in any case, and they should be packaged and labeled separately. And then I have another quote from the FBI, from the symposium held on proceedings of the International Symposium on Forensic Hair Comparisons. Again, I have copies for anyone that wishes to read them.
Is this the one that you furnished copies of to everyone?
Yes, that's the correct one.
All right.
May I refer you to, Ms. Kestler, may I refer you to page 11 of that document that has been furnished to court and counsel, which you furnished to me this morning, page 11,
Right,
the
that's
second
correct.
paragraph.
It is recommended that a known head hair sample consist of at least 20 hairs from each of 5 different areas of the scalp, and then refers to center, front, back, and both sides, and that these hairs be obtained by both pulling and combing. And then it goes on to talk about a little bit of procedure in doing that collection, and then it goes on to talking about how we select that, or what the routine procedure for selecting a random sample of those 100 hairs is. And that's where we have come up over the years from different sources for wanting between 30 to 100 head hairs for microscopic comparison for the exemplar.
Now, this article that you're quoting from that you just quoted from was put out by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
That's correct.
It's dated 1985.
That's correct.
To the best of your knowledge, has the practice changed any among criminalists concerning the size of sample required for an effective microscopic analysis of hairs?
No, it has not.
And the book you quoted from, co-authored by Henry C. Lee, the portion that you just read to us would seem to indicate also that
I haven't heard the end of the question yet, so I can't quite rule.
reading the article that you've read to us, the portion of the article you've read to us from the book co-authored by Henry Lee, what do you deduce concerning his practice or advised practice in terms of the size of sample required to do an effective microscopic analysis of hairs?
Well, it appears to purport that the authors of this book indicate that a minimum of 30 to 40 hairs is necessary before you have an adequate sample.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the pages that have been Xeroxed by the witness be copied for both counsel and one for the court. I'd like to mark it or also admit this for the court's consideration in addition to the article that I've furnished the court with this morning.
All right, did you want to then mark those as actual exhibits with regard to the motion?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so we'll denote Proceedings of the International Symposium on Forensic Hair Comparisons article as People's Exhibit Number 1 for purposes of this motion only.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And would you describe the title of the other document, please?
Yes, Your Honor. It's entitled Forensic Science, an Introduction to Criminalistics, authored by Peter DeForest, R.E. Gainslen, that's Gaensslen, and Henry C. Lee.
And you wanted to note that as People's 2 for this
Yes, Your
motion?
Honor. Thank you.
All right. Do you have additional questions of the witness at this time?
Just a couple more, Your Honor. Thank
All
you.
right.
With respect to the information that you've given us concerning DNA analysis and the quantities of evidence required to perform those tests, where did you get that information?
The amount of sample needed for DNA analysis has been given to us over the years by different entities and experts in the field, including the FBI, Cellmark, private laboratory Cellmark Diagnostics. Obviously, before we sent something to them, we needed to know what they purported to be the minimum sample that was required. It began, and I can indicate too, it began when we first started that a quarter-size sample of blood was necessary to do RFLP analysis, and they've progressed to where it's down to about what they refer to as a nickel size, which equates to one of our 1 centimeter square swatches soaked heavily with blood.
So do you undertake to conduct that evaluation with respect to blood evidence on a routine basis? And that evaluation being whether or not an evidence sample of blood is sufficient in quantity or quality for DNA testing?
Yes, we do. We have sent out over 100 cases for RFLP, all of which have been evaluated in the same manner that we've discussed here today, and those contained in excess of 400 items, which we've evaluated for RFLP or PCR or other types of analysis, and it's basically done on the basis that we discussed here today.
And when you say RFLP and PCR, you're referring to tests for DNA?
Yes, 2 different types of testing for DNA, that's correct.
So the evaluation process to determine how much, whether you have a sufficient sample for further testing is something that is done by you on a routine basis?
Yes.
And have you previously been consulted before as to whether there is sufficient evidence, blood, to allow for a split?
In other cases, yes.
And is that also done by you on a routine basis?
Yes, in last couple of recent years, I've turned that over to other people, but in the beginning, when we first began sending out DNA, I strictly did the evaluation myself.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Shapiro?
Yes,
Anything further?
Your Honor, may I direct the court's and counsel's attention to our discovery motion item 29C, which we had filed last week regarding expert witnesses. Any and all writings or publications used in any way by the experts in forming opinions or obtaining a basis for forming an opinion, including teaching manuals, journals, treatise, textbooks, bulletins, and other records of classes in the expert's field of expertise or otherwise. Again, we've been repeatedly assured every time an issue comes up that all items of discovery will be complied with. Clearly, this has not been complied with.
Your Honor, it has. I turned over everything as soon as I received it. This morning I received the item now marked as People's 1, and as counsel was able to see, the witness brought people's number 2 with her, and I didn't have any knowledge of it until the witness brought it in. And if counsel would like to question the witness as to how she came about obtaining people's 2 and whether I've ever seen it before she brought it out on the witness stand today, I'd welcome him to do so.
Mr. Shapiro, it strikes me that this motion with regard to the hairs was one that sort of came up rather suddenly based on your filing an order for my signature yesterday, I believe, limiting the hair sample to 1 hair. And that's how we got on this whole issue. And if you feel that you haven't had sufficient time to meet these manuals, then I'm willing to give you some additional time to deal with that. But I don't see that there's been any bad faith exercise on the part of the people at this point in time, in light of the short notice that we're dealing with here in this instance.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're prepared to proceed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. With regard to the book that you have relied on, have you read that book in its entirety?
No, I have not.
What portions of the book have you read?
Oh, over the years, I've read different portions. It's basically a reference book. I sort of collect books on forensic evidence, and especially by people I know, and I know all the authors of this book personally. So I have, read different parts here and there. I haven't read the whole thing. It's repetitive of many things. There's only small sections on hair and blood. There's other sections on, this is entirely forensic science. It's an introduction to criminalistics.
Regarding the section on hair that you have relied on in forming your opinion, do the authors of that book say how many hairs should be plucked for comparison for DNA analysis?
I don't recall because this was written in 1983. And so for DNA, again, DNA, it takes a minimum, well, first of all, we're not going to do DNA on any of the hair we're asking for. We're only asking for the hair for microscopic comparison purposes.
So then you don't need any roots?
Yes, we need roots for microscopic comparison purposes. It's not a valid sample to be only looking at the shaft and not the entire hair.
My question now is, in reading the book that you've relied on in making your opinion, does it say how many hair samples of roots should be obtained?
Well, yes, I believe it did.
Objection vague. For what purpose? Microscopic analysis? What is counsel referring to?
I believe it.
Mr. Shapiro, are you referring now just to microscopic
Yes, Your
analysis? Thank you.
On page 211, I believe I referred to it before, it says, ordinarily the hairs should not be cut, which indicates plucking right off. They suggest plucking them all. That's the inference I read here.
Is that what it says? Well, would you read it?
It says, known samples, these are the known samples, should be given careful consideration. If questioned hairs are to be submitted, and that's our evidence hairs, then the known sample, that's what we're asking for, should contain representative samples from different parts of the scalp. Ordinarily, the hairs should not be cut. Vigorous combing or massaging of the scalp will usually yield 30 to 40 telogen hairs, or essentially adult hairs or viable hairs. If the questioned sample is thought to contain anagen hairs, which is underdeveloped hairs, then so must the known sample, and these must be plucked, because you cannot shake those out.
Does it say how many should be plucked?
It says ordinarily the hairs should not be cut. That's all 30 or 40 of them. And it says here that if you vigorously comb or massage the head, that you should be able to yield 30 or 40 hairs with roots. That's what they're inferring.
So what you are relying upon then is that a vigorous massaging of Mr. Simpson's head along with combing should give you sufficient sample.
That's what that one reference refers to. The
Okay.
reference of preference. I brought that specifically because of your reference to Dr. Lee this morning. And that's an older reference than the FBI symposium reference, which indicates that on page 11, that these hairs can be obtained by both pulling and combing, and they don't give a number. And no, we don't need a lot of roots,
Thank you.
but we
Nothing
need
further.
more than one.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Clark, do you have any further questions?
Any further?
I have just a couple of questions. Do you know approximately how many hairs the typical human head, male human head, contains?
No, I do not.
You have no idea at all?
No, it varies. It varies. I mean, just in looking around the room, it varies totally. I didn't mean that to be funny. It varies greatly.
Is there like a minimum typical number of human hairs?
No.
All right. In the course of an average day, is there some number of hairs that one loses just through the normal course of the day, combing your hair and?
Again, there's a random average of what you shed on a daily basis, but you tend to shed dead hairs which don't necessarily contain roots.
So when we're talking about 100 hairs, which is the most that your periodical indicates, and is that like a lot of hairs compared to the total number of hairs on a human head?
No, it is not. Not on someone with a full head of hair. I would say if someone is, and I don't want to point anyone out in the room, but I would say if someone is balding to an excessive degree, I guess 100 hairs would be a lot. And then you don't have all 5 areas to pluck from either, so you're only going to pluck from the areas available. So, you know, we're flexible here. That's why we say 30 to 100. We're not saying we have to have 100 hairs.
Okay. Are there any further questions based upon the court's questions?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Kestler, thank you very much. You may step
Thank you,
down.
Your Honor.
Ms. Clark, do you intend to present any other evidence with regard to this issue?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Shapiro, do you intend to present any evidence on this issue at this time?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Does either side wish to be heard?
Yes, sure. Regarding the issue of blood samples, I think clearly with the number of samples that have been made and the test that has been done, to allow the Los Angeles Police Department crime lab to consume all of the samples deprives Mr. Simpson of his right to an independent analysis of the samples, and therefore will prevent him from ever coming forward to show that errors have been made in the analysis.
Ms. Clark?
I think that we have repetitively covered that ground. If what counsel is attempting to assure himself of is that there are no errors in the methods employed in the analysis, I have invited him and a team of experts to examine and observe every step of the procedure of testing as to every single item. I repeat that invitation again. I can only reiterate, Your Honor, that the investigation has to be governed by the appropriate scientific procedures as determined by the experts, and that the prosecution must be permitted to investigate its own case. To do otherwise would permit counsel to come forward, limit the number of tests that we conduct on a piece of evidence, and then argue to the court that the results of testing are unreliable because they were incomplete. Obviously, that's a catch-22 situation that the people should never be placed in. We want to thoroughly investigate this case and obtain every result possible to gain maximum confidence in the results. Any exclusion that is obtained by the result of any test may very well indicate that the source of the item in question is not the source that was anticipated, either be it victim or witness or defendant. Likewise, any inclusion would tend to corroborate the inclusions indicated by prior tests. So the complete testing of every item of evidence is clearly a very necessary and important thing. Therefore, people simply indicate that they are we are desirous of pursuing every test possible, and we invite counsel and all team of experts he wants to have present to please come and observe every process, test every buffer and every solution to make sure that nothing is contaminated, and that way we will preserve every right to which he's entitled.
All right, the court is prepared to make its ruling at this time. And that is this. What Ms. Clark has characterized as an invitation to the defense to be present at these various testing of these various samples about which we've heard testimony today is going to be more than an invitation. It's going to be subject to a court order that, in fact, the defense be present for the testing that's performed on any of these items, particularly in light of the fact that the only testimony that was presented today is that Ms. Kestler, who is the expert in this area who testified, does not know whether in fact any of the tests that are going to be performed will in fact consume the entire sample. In light of that fact that we do not know whether there'll be a sample remaining, in order to safeguard Mr. Simpson's rights in this matter, the court does order that the defense be entitled to be present as indicated, and not just by mere invitation, but as a requirement in this case. With regard to the hairs and the number of hairs, the court will order that the prosecution be entitled to obtain at least 40, but no more than 100 hairs from the various areas, the 5 areas as denoted in the scalp of Mr. Simpson. That should accommodate a sufficient sample of hair to perform microscopic analysis or any other analysis that the people have indicated that they may do, and sufficient sample for the defense also to perform their tests after the prosecution is finished performing whatever tests they need as well. If that at some point in time is insufficient, then the matter can be revisited at some future date. But I think that really should accommodate the needs of everyone, and hopefully we can put this issue to rest at this point. Now, with those matters taken care of, we can move to the substance of the hearing today, which is for the purpose of conducting the preliminary hearing in this case. And although we did have a brief conference in chambers with the reporter, I just wanted to reiterate on the record that both sides are ready to proceed to preliminary hearing. Is that right, Mr. Shapiro?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Clark?
That is, Your Honor.
All right. The court is in receipt of a notice of motion and motion to suppress and return evidence, to quash and traverse search warrant, and a memorandum of points and authorities and declaration of Gerald Ullman in support. That motion was filed yesterday afternoon, almost 5 o'clock. Now, it would be the court's proposal that we handle that motion, and at the time that we commence that motion, we are in fact commencing the preliminary hearing in this case, but that we handle the motion first before we get to any other kind of testimony or other issues with regard to the preliminary hearing. Is there any objection to handling the motion first?
If I may be heard, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. The people were served this motion at 10 minutes to 5 last night. We had no prior notice of any intention of the defense to file such a motion. In light of that fact, we were prepared to proceed with civilian witnesses in this preliminary hearing, as I informed defense counsel pursuant to his phone call to me last night. In view of the fact that those witnesses were already prepared and subpoenaed to be in court, we were unable to contact them and rescind their subpoena in time, and they will be substantially inconvenienced at this point if we are to proceed with the motion in lieu of their testimony. What I'm asking of the court, if it is acceptable, Your Honor, is to present the testimony of these civilian witnesses and proceed with the motion on Tuesday, when the civilian witnesses will have been all contacted and told not to attend court, so that we can handle the motion instead.
All right. I personally have no problem with that. I assume that the testimony of civilian witnesses is not going to specifically relate to the issues or the evidence that's involved in this motion to suppress. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. Ullman?
With respect to the filing of the motion, Your Honor, much of the factual basis of the motion was based on testimony that was presented in the grand jury that the defense first became aware of on Monday or Tuesday of this week, when we obtained the grand jury transcripts. And the motion was filed just as soon as it was completed. We have no objection to proceeding with witnesses who will not present any testimony affected by the motion to suppress. But before any testimony is presented relating to evidence obtained at the premises of Mr. Simpson, we would like the motion to be heard.
All right, I think that's an agreeable way to proceed in this case. And so we will defer then any further evidence with regard to the motion until Tuesday. You have sufficient civilian witnesses, you feel, to fill the remainder of today and tomorrow as well?
I believe I do, Your Honor. It's hard to predict the length of cross-examination, but I think that that will be the case.
All right. Do you have a witness available at this time?
Your Honor, I will be presenting the first two civilian witnesses on behalf of the people. It is my understanding that those witnesses are sequestered per the court's suggestion
Yes.
in an office upstairs. If I need granted leave to contact someone upstairs and see if I can have at least the first of those witnesses brought to this court.
All right, let me just ask a question. And I know that we got off to a late start because of things that were out of the control of any of us. If we were to take the 15-minute recess, which is a little bit earlier than I anticipated at this point, until 3 o'clock, which is actually a little bit more than 15 minutes, and then at 3 o'clock we began the testimony and went straight until 4:30, that would give you time to get your witness down here without any disruption at this point. Because otherwise the witness is probably going to take, 5 minutes or so to come from the 18th floor to get down here.
That's what I would expect.
And then we'd end up taking a break shortly after we began. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll take the afternoon recess at this point in time, begin promptly at 3 o'clock. Please have your witness here so that we can begin the testimony at that time.